Hey guys, Josh with the Update Channel, and we're back in the can of worms here. It's a new week. It's a new day. The sun is rising. What do we have going on? Well, I'm going to bring it back in. We're going to do a charge air cooler test, but not just charge air cooler. I want to charge the whole intake system and see. Maybe I missed a clamp. Maybe another part was leaking that I didn't see before when we had 500 little leaks. So let's pull her in and see what we can find out. Oh boy, we're back at it again, folks. So what we're going to be doing here is we're going to test the CAC, but we're going to go this way instead of the other way. The reason for that is it's easier to plug this end because it's so complicated. So most people would go this way through there to test this whole system, but you can't because it has a CGI, which is basically EGR. So there's multiple inputs into the turbo. So what we're going to be doing is capping here and then pressurizing the other side. So that should test 95% of our fittings here. And we found a newest member, Western States family here, and he's praying for us, folks, that we get this fixed. Always found praying mantises to be, for some reason, the coolest insects. At least I believe they're insects. They got 6 legs, but pretty cool. I saw them out here. Pretty much almost exactly matches the pillar here, but I thought it was cool. Anyway, let's get to work. So here's what we got going on. We've got this adapter that basically fits different size boots, and you put that in the tube, and then you just run the clamp down. Then that gives you a way to pressurize the intake system here. You can see I've got the intake manifold with a rag over it just to keep any debris from getting in there. So that's tightened down. Now we need to go over and I'll show you how I capped off the other end. It just makes it easier capping that turbocharger side. Look at that cool orange toolbox, I tell you what. And this is what I got going on here. It's got the large bung that's tight, and then we've got the retainer to keep it from blowing out. Well, we're not going to be running at super high pressure, but you know, it's better to be safe than sorry. So we've got our airline here, and we're just going to hook this 120 psi airline up right to the intake, right?
Wrong.
Just plug it in, right? Just stick that 120 psi airline on there, right? No. You always want to run a regulator because the intake system's obviously not rated for 120 psi. So generally I test in the 10 to 20 range, even though these engines can get up to make 40, maybe 50 on the C15s as far as boost, but this way you can adjust the amount of air and what pressure you're checking for, and a big leak's going to show itself even with very little pressure. So we're going to put some air to it, and then we're going to go look for leaks, which is what we were doing in the previous videos, and what I thought would fixed already, but apparently, of course not. We seem to fix this one. It's a can of worms, so everything we touch just makes 10 more problems. So we got about 10 psi there going, and you can hear big air leak. But of course, finding the source of the air leak is kind of the problem here, because there's so many tubes, and about half of them you can't even get to or see. The ones behind the turbocharger, behind the pre-cooler, the pre-cooler clamps that aren't the ones in front. So just trying to find where that air leak is can be pretty tricky. So keep looking around here. Was able to identify where it's coming from, and it's coming from this clamp right here. See it behind there? Don't worry, it's super easy to get to, right?
I lied.
Yeah, it's not. It's horrible. You have to remove 3 other tubes just to get to that one clamp there. And it's leaking. And I think it looks like it's off by maybe a 1/16 of an inch. They're hard to get positioned right because they've got the 2 connection points. It's got the turbo coming in at an angle, and then it has the 90 degree, and then it goes to the pre-cooler. But you can see it's really leaking badly there. So it looks like I made a mistake, and it's just not seated correctly there. So yeah, it was about a 1/16 of an inch off. I needed to rotate the turbo just a little bit more. I thought I'd gotten all these because I'm pretty particular when I'm putting its clamps on, but took about 15 minutes to get back to, so luckily, even though there's a bunch of stuff in the way, I'm getting pretty good at removing and installing all these clamps. So got that repositioned. I looked at it. The flange looked totally fine. The clamp looked fine. It's not like it had been distorted or messed up by being misaligned there. Just like I said, just by a little bit. And you can see there's a little gap. You might be saying, well, that's not normal. Well, there's going to be a gap because it's ridged, and the inner ridge actually contacts the turbo, not the outer ridge. So got her all back together, as you can see, and let's pressure check it again. So I didn't disconnect anything on the intake side here. I just left it all hooked up because I knew I'd be doing a pressure check again. And that's what we're doing. So get a few PSI, about 10. And we'll go over there. Now what I like to do too is I'll turn the valve off and see how long it takes to drain the boosted air out of the system, but kind of drains pretty quickly, and I can still hear a leak. Fun. So what the heck is it the same clamp? I know it was misaligned at first. Is there something wrong with the turbo flange? Because it got the new bellows. The clamp was fine. The connection point's fine. It's not misaligned now. I don't know what the heck's going on here. Just looking at this CGI line, making sure that was tight, seeing if I can see it in a different angle to see what the heck is going on. So get some soapy water and we'll see if it's leaking again, which doesn't really make any sense to me, but should be tight unless there's something actually wrong with that turbo flange itself. I'd had it off and it didn't look weird, but it doesn't take much to get these to leak. So why is it still leaking?
I mean, what the hell is going on?
Okay, so as you can see, we have some tubes removed again, and I'm not sure why it's leaking still. Yes, like I said, it was misaligned at first. That makes sense, but it's not anymore. So I'm going to pull the turbocharger compressor housing off and see what the heck is going on. Now this is not, unfortunately, let's say there's something wrong with the compressor housing on the turbocharger. You can't replace just that because you have to buy the entire turbo assembly from CAT, which is obviously very expensive. And also I'm very fearful about removing the turbo if the customer did want to replace it, if that ends up being the problem, because that goes to the exhaust manifold. Now, with how much stuff has been rusted and broken, the last thing I want to do is find out that the exhaust manifold's warped compared to the new turbo, and then I'm trying to replace the exhaust manifold and the new turbo. And then you find out that the exhaust manifold itself is warped going to the cylinder head. And then at the end of the day, you wind up with a new truck. So, like I said, it's a can of worms, so the more stuff you touch, the more problems you have. So, we're going to pull this turbocharger compressor housing off and then see if we can get it to seal. I don't know why it's not sealing. It's just, that does not make sense to me. And if maybe it was like a little bubble or something, but it's a pretty good sized leak there, and that's pretty irritating because I'd replaced this part. It was leaking before, replaced that part, but maybe there's something wrong with the turbo there. So clamp's fully off there. Now we have to try and get this clamp off the compressor housing, which usually not too difficult. I had this off before, remember, when I was cleaning it with my needle scaler in the previous video, so luckily it's not seized to it. So that is off now, and we can get that compressor housing off. I'm going to see if maybe that compressor housing lip's warped or something. There's not much you can do about that, but we're going to do the best we can here with what we got. And you got to be real careful when pulling these off because the fins on the I guess you'd call it the compressor wheel itself can be damaged when you're removing or installing this. So you got to be careful. So looking at the lip here, it doesn't seem, I mean, it's got a lot of pitting and stuff around it, but it looks like it's got an okay sealing face towards it. So like I said, it's ridged, so you can see the real bright spot. That's where it actually seats against that bellows piece. And there are some gaps where it's not as bright as the other parts. So even though I needle scaled it, there's still some rust and stuff around it. I mean, the whole thing's rusted. So I think what I'm going to do is try and flat sand this part here. I try to clean off all the rust around the ridges. I don't know what else to do really outside of maybe replace this turbocharger, but like I said, that I'm really leery about doing that. And I'm sure the customer doesn't want to do it either because like the turbo itself is fine. The turbo itself spins freely. The housings go together fine. So I'd really hate to replace the turbo just because this one flange is not sealing 100%. But If we can't get it to seal 100%, it's not going to want to regen. So, let's try to do the best we can with what we got here. Also, previous video, I had some comments. People say they put anti-seize around the ends there, and it helps the clamp seat better, so I'll give that a try. Can't hurt. So we're back together here. I've lost count how many times we've removed and installed this section of clamp, but it's still leaking though. Making me a little angry.
Do you know who you're dealing with?
Alright guys, so we are getting prepared to do our hopefully final regen. We don't have any airlines going to the intake. Well, I mean, none that aren't supposed to be going there at least. We do not have any big leaks. That fitting, or where the clamp goes to the turbo outlet, still leaking air. A lot less though, so it seems like cleaning it more, getting more of the rust off, and then also putting that copper anti-seize. I forget, a couple people said they do that on clamps and really seem to help get the seat of the clamp to sit tighter, or deeper I should say. I don't know what it's going to do though. We still got a leak. It is holding air though now. Before, when I would shut the valve off, it would lose air pressure immediately. Now it's actually holding air in the intake when with the CAC charge tester. So I'm hopeful. Not real hopeful here, folks. Our boost is within specifications technically. So 1.7 is the minimum. Secondary air though, not building as much as I thought. Remember when we first started on this truck though, in the first episode, we had 0. So we're getting to the point where it's pretty much fixed. I don't know. It's really close to the minimums. Hopefully doing the last regen here. Alright, let's see if it ignites. Should. It's got a lot more secondary air now. It's got more secondary air now than it did before with me cheating, so... Well, it's ignited fine. Hopefully, it regens. One thing that people ask a lot, or not a lot, but they were asking, if you look at your temperatures here, so the higher temperature, the one that's about 1900 degrees now, that is your ARD flame temperature. The one below that is your EGT3, which is ARD outlet temperature. Those two temperatures are not always the same from engine to engine. Also, the ECM doesn't necessarily monitor those as closely as you would think. It's looking more DPF inlet and outlet temperature, also flame temperature to make sure we haven't lost combustion. But I've seen engines go where the ARD flame temperature is maybe 1100, but it's regenning fine, and I've seen them be at 2000 and it's not regenning. So it's not one uniform temperature. Mostly what it's looking for is the DPF inlet and outlet temperature, and it's looking for that to be close to 1100 degrees. So that's what's more important. Well, folks, the regen failed again. Low secondary air mass flow. I think they might have too many letters over the math. Anyway, this is frustrating, folks. What else could be leaking? Well, the flange that I sealed off on the intake manifold, that's pretty freaking corroded. I guess we can check it again and see, maybe we got a big leak there that wasn't showing when I tested it when I first started, because that was all the leaks on the exhaust side wouldn't allow it to even get to the intake side. I don't know, folks. So if you're wondering what the specifications actually are, they're here. So minimum is 1.7 psi of boost, and the minimum flow is 144 pounds an hour of secondary air. Now my buddy Dale, he said that he likes to rev up the engine and then just soak everything with soapy water. Now, I never thought this would really work because the boost pressure is not very high generally on an engine with, non-VGT engine, but it actually works. Now, one thing's probably people are wondering, have you checked the air filter? Because that could obviously cause lower boost, but it is clean as a whistle. So let's see what's leaking here just by revving it up. Well, that's cool. Actually leaking between the cartridge and the compressor housing here. And quite a bit. So, I haven't never seen one leak there before like that. That's definitely interesting. Now, obviously, we're doing this when it's warm. Now, the compressor side's not as hot as the exhaust side, obviously, but definitely leaking. It's also leaking back there on the other one, but look at that. The more we fix, the more leaks we find. So, it's been determined that the repair strategy that we are going to attempt to initiate on this here truck engine is a chemical composition that comes in a container. Am I a big fan of this? Not really.
You sold your soul to Satan.
So we're going to put aviation gasket sealant between the turbo flanges, between all the leaks, and see if it works. Don't think it will, but here we're trying. Also, we've got some big-time smoke up here in Idaho. Being from Vegas, they don't have these things down there, but there's these things called trees up here, and sometimes in the summer, they get dry, and they just kind of burst into flames, and that's kind of happening all over the place. But anyway, let's see what disgusting garbage we can put on this turbocharger. So we've trying to seal these flanges, and like I said, folks, if we could make it 50% better, it would probably not fix, quote unquote, but get it to the point where it's going to regen with no problem. Not a real big fan of this, folks, but we've got it here. I've sealed the two big ones, or actually the three, because we had the ones on the billows between the turbochargers. Obviously, you want to make sure anytime you mess with the compressor housing that it still spins freely. So if it doesn't, you're going to destroy that turbo real quick. So that one's back together. Put this stuff on there. Time for a test of the air system verification system. So, what do we got? Well, our boost is a little higher. It's bouncing between 1.7 and 2 here. But what's our air numbers going to read? Much higher? Lower? Who knows? 146! So we've gained 1 pound per hour of air, folks. I'd like to say that's not going to work. So we're just revving it up here. Not even going to try and do the regen, really, to see what stopped leaking. Now, it actually did seem to fix that leak we had going on there. That's still bubbling out of there, unfortunately. And, of course, the one on the back, that one is perpetually going to leak, probably till the end of time. So, what are we going to try next?
Reason for madness.
Ah, yes. My most hated of items. Actually, I don't hate silicone. It's just I think it's overused all over the place. So we're going to just take 50 gallons of this crap and stuff every orifice and hole that there is until everything stops leaking. I'm just kidding. We're just going to try and put as little as possible to seal the leak. So, looking at the flanges here, you can see the aviation gasket sealant. It never actually hardens. It kind of stays kind of a sticky, syrupy gunk consistency. That's normal, but it actually did seem to seal that flange. At least maybe that's what did. It is hard to clean off though, and you can see here where we had it on the turbocharger. It seemed like it was slowing down that leak, but the numbers don't lie, folks. They didn't really change much. So I took this off and I reseated it just to see maybe we got something going on here. From what I could tell, I put paint around it and put them together, and it seemed like they were mating fine, but it's just leaking no matter what. Figure maybe since it was misaligned, the clamp maybe was wrong. So I have a couple of those clamps spare. I put a new clamp on it. You can see we've got our lovely gray silicone here ready to seal this system up back to factory specifications. So back together magically. Gonna get our oil lines on here. You might be saying, those are oil lines going to the intake? Well, that's called your CGI mixing valve there, which is basically CAT's version of EGR. And they use an electronically controlled oil pressure driven solenoid. They use that for the CGI. They also use it for the secondary air here, which that valve's up front there. Not sure why they run oil and electronically control these valves, but They do. They actually don't have a lot of problems with them. As far as the lines leaking or anything like that, I don't think I've ever seen the lines really burst open or anything, but it is a kind of complicated system just to move air, but whatever. I'm not the engineer who put it together. So this one I'm actually keeping the aviation gasket sealant on. I don't like silicone. I'm going to use it as little as possible in as few places as possible. And it actually, the aviation gasket sealant had sealed that flange before. So going to get her back together. And hopefully this thing will regen. Now you might be wondering, hey, you know, it's actually hitting the minimum specifications of 144 pounds of air, so why isn't it regenning? Well, the air system verification test takes place when it's not regenning. When it regens, your DPF differential pressure goes up because you're injecting more heat and air into the system, and that causes your secondary air number to go down. So we're sitting at a solid 2 psi here, so that is at slightly above the minimum specification there. And when the valve opens, we'll see what the heck it does. Hopefully it's a little better. I mean, I'd like to see 200, but anything better than what we had will hopefully allow it to regen. So, oh, hit 150. So we're a couple pounds higher. And it's regenning. Of course, it was regenning before until it kicked out for low secondary air. But pressures, all the temperatures are looking pretty good there. Like I said, we're just trying to get it to regen. We're going to do 2 regens, actually. And if we can get it to pass, they're going to take it. So this one's looking good. Let's check back in a little bit. Success! We're in the 90s. So once you're in the 90s, it's good because it actually turns the fuel off, keeps the air for a clean burn. Hey guys, so this is really the end of the green can of worms. Now, did the silicone fix it? No, it really didn't. It only marginally increased the secondary air. It's still not really where it's supposed to be, but it did enough to do a regen. Now, does that mean in 5 hours when a differential pressure is a little higher, is it going to do a regen? Probably not, would be my guess. But they don't want to do the turbocharger, and I understand. It's expensive, but without fixing it properly, I'm not sure how it's going to last, but you know, it's not my truck. It's not my decision to make. We did the best with what we could. In hindsight, it probably should have, which I learned a few things in this video, pressure tested it backwards. I like that trick. I forget who commented about that, but that's a good way to do it. It's easier than trying to force air in through the turbochargers. And I should have been more thorough initially for looking for leaks. Now, I found a whole bunch of leaks, but I didn't find all of them. I could have found more. But to tell you the truth, if I would have sprayed that area that was leaking, I was already changing that bellows, so I don't think it would have told me that the turbocharger would have need replaced. I would have said the bellows need replaced, which we did anyway, so not sure. I would have gone about it differently. Of course, hindsight's 20/20. I didn't change any parts, though, that didn't need replaced. Unfortunately, they don't want to replace the final part that doesn't need replaced, but did the best we could. Thanks for watching.